updating the tragedy for Brian Robinson Jr., and as well projecting our 53, our initial 53, because it sure is subject to change. That's next on the Locked On Commanders podcast. Let's roll.
Our Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, everybody, we welcome you aboard and welcome you in, Commanders fans, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We're your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and the new WUSA 9 Plus app. Your CBS affiliate in Washington, D.C. has a new streaming app that is a game changer for local news and sports in the DMV. Download the WUSA 9 Plus app now from your Roku or Amazon Fire TV stick. No matter how you're joining us today and on this episode, we appreciate you and we thank you for making us your first listen and your first view of the day. My co-host is David Harrison. He is still under the weather, hoping the best for him, but normally David on top of things for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation and Commander Country, covering the Washington Commanders. I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst Show, Monday through Friday, 9 to noon Eastern Time on the Team 980 and always live on the Audacy app, which of course is a free app, and you can listen to the radio show on download, on delay, whatever you want live, and as well you can listen to the Locked On Commanders podcast, also on the Audacy app. When we're not here or there, we're on Twitter. David is at dharrison82. I'm at Russellmania621. That's Russellmania621. And the show is at Locked On, LO Commanders, LO Commanders. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. It's that simple. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKED ON. That's prizepicks.com, and use the promo code LOCKED ON. All right, coming up, who do we have making the initial Commanders 53-man roster, and how does the loss of Brian Robinson affect that? Again, we thank you for making LOC your first listen and or view of the day. All right, here's the latest on Brian Robinson Jr. We did not put out an episode on Sunday night because by the time we had any official reaction from the team, it was very late, and my schedule did not allow it. I had some things going on. But we've been monitoring the whole situation and trying to update on Twitter at LO Commanders, of course, and I had full coverage of it on my radio show. This is the first time that we're able to get a new show out right here on Locked On Commanders. So some of this you may know, some of this you might not know, but Robinson confirmed on Monday morning that he indeed did have surgery since the incident. Not exactly known if it was Sunday night, Monday morning, not also exactly known whether what type of surgery it was, whether it was bullet removal, whether it was wound removal. We just don't know. It was made immediately clear on Sunday night and again on Monday that the situation and the wounds and the injuries were non-life threatening. So that was the most important thing. Sad, tragic, awful gun violence. It's just all part of it. Carjacking. It sucks. It's awful. But at least you could reasonably breathe safely that Brian Robinson was, again, dealing with non-life-threatening injuries. Of course, we didn't know that way back when with Sean Taylor, how serious the situation was, and we pretty much knew it was serious, I think, from the get-go. That was quickly ruled out, thankfully, and in some amazing sort of relief that nobody was really worried based on what the information the organization was releasing and what police were basically saying to reporters that Brian Robinson was dealing with non-life-threatening injuries. By the time you watch or listen to this, Robinson may have already been released from the hospital. Several of his teammates, including Jonathan Allen, said on late Monday morning that that's what they had heard, that's what they were expecting, that's what might be possible. That seems a little bit of a fast turnaround for me, but I'm not a doctor, and nor will I play one on the podcast. Via our friend Eric Flack of WUSA 9 TV. You heard us talk about the WUSA 9 Plus app in the open. We love Eric's work. He does tremendous work. Again, Brian Robinson, according to Flack sources and what he's learned from police, he wrestled the gun away from one of the two teenagers that tried to rob him and apparently carjack him. I don't know if we have confirmation specifically of the carjacking, but basically robbery, carjacking, maybe a little bit of both, not sure. Before he was shot twice in the leg by the second team. We're not sure if the second team was 15 or 17, because that's what police say the suspects are, 15 and 17. And apparently they fled in a stolen vehicle. At this point, again, we're not sure if that stolen vehicle was just some innocent random stolen vehicle, because Brian Robinson's vehicle was shown in a video by TMZ and I believe by another local news outlet as having been towed away from the scene. So I don't believe that, of course, is where they fled. Don't know any more about that. But here's what more we do know. This, according to multiple reporters, Brian Robinson was shot with a Glock 43X. That, according to the public incident report from the D.C. Police Department, via Evan Lambert at Evan Lambert TV. Robinson apparently was accosted, fought back, wrestled again the gun away from one of the suspects while the other accomplice shot him after leaving from the Crab Boss restaurant on 8th Street in Northeast Washington, D.C., right near the famous Ben's Chili Bowl restaurant, for those of you that know Washington, D.C. and the history of Ben's Chili Bowl. So certainly a very populated area. According to Megan Cloherty, my colleague over at WTOP News, Megan does a tremendous job. Again, Robinson was shot in the leg and the hip. Ian Rappaport basically referred to it as the buttocks area, maybe, again, kind of the hip / butt area. Not that specifically that matters. And again, ATF was tracing one gun, which it appears that they've identified as a Glock 43X, found at the scene to one of the suspects, and I think that's how they came up with the ages. Now, again, we'll have to wait and see. By the time you watch this, we could have arrest. We don't know. Now, from a football perspective, and yes, there is a football perspective to this, unfortunately. It doesn't look like Brian Robinson's going to play anytime soon. Let's start with that. That's not all that important. I mean, he is the starting running back, so it is important. I can't make like it doesn't matter. It, of course, matters. But comparatively, most importantly, his health, his safety, his recovery mentally, physically is most important. But it is possible. And again, by the time you watch or listen to this, it could already be done that they put him on the NFI, the non-football injury list, which is similar to the PUP list, but it's used basically to designate athletes and players that suffered injuries or ailments outside of normal NFL activities, which this clearly would fit under, right? Think about it this way. An NFL.com cited these. Minka Fitzpatrick's wrist injury, falling off a bike on vacation. That's not football. Jamison Williams and John Mechie. Now, these were football, but they were before they came to the NFL. And for Alabama, they both blew out their knees, right? So again, these are kind of things. Junior Gillette, Trent Williams, think about over the years for the Washington NFL franchise at various different times, right? Now, apparently, according to NFL.com, they can be activated after the team has played its first 4 regular season games. Now, a player on the NFI list is not automatically entitled to receive his salary, unlike the injured reserve list, right? With a physically unable to perform list. So that is something to keep in mind, but I would have a hard time thinking that the Commanders are not going to take care of their player. Of course they are. I mean, he didn't do anything wrong by all accounts, right? So I really hope they don't try and squeeze money out of him. You can negotiate between the team and the player for whatever that's important. But again, most importantly, that is probably going to be the designation. Ron alluded to that on Monday morning, I should say. That's what I believed was going to be the case anyway. And again, nobody should expect Brian Robinson to play anytime soon. How soon? Don't know. Ron said there is a chance that he comes back, but you'd probably be expecting, second half of the season, if even that early. So, how does Brian Robinson Jr.'s situation affect our 53-man roster projection with roster cuts coming officially by Tuesday at 4 o'clock Eastern time? Well, we are going to get into that, guys, coming up next. But first, we tell you about our friends at prizepicks.com. That's right. If you're looking for fun in a competitive fashion, look no more. You want to introduce your guys? We want to introduce you guys to our friends and partners at this wonderful company named PrizePicks and prizepicks.com. What's PrizePicks? Well, it's daily fantasy action where you can make entries on PrizePicks that allow you to challenge yourself, your knowledge, and your expertise on player projections that are generated by PrizePicks.com. Here's what you do. You pick between 2 and 5 players, and you go more or less on their statistical projection for that particular event. For instance, this Thursday night, week 1 in the college football season is underway. And say you want to go with the new quarterback at Pitt, Keaton Slovis, who transferred over from USC at his new home. And say you want to go more or less on the 264.5. Well, you pick more and boom, away you go. And if he throws for more than 265 yards, you're going to win. Same thing for Tennessee's Hendon Hooker, who puts up a lot of offense in that Josh Heupel-led offense for Tennessee. His number is at 289.5 through the air. If you want to choose those two guys, and that's it, you're in. You got to pick between 2 and 5, but you could also take a shot at players for rushing yards, receiving yards, and much more. Again, between 2 and 5 players, if they score more or less and your projections match up, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. You can pick any sport that's in season, even sports that right now are not in season. You can start taking a look at that. Entrance can be made in less than 60 seconds. It's that easy. Safe and fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. All you have to do is download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com, as we say on your screen, to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. And first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code LOCKED ON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks is going to give you $100. If you just deposit $50, PrizePicks is going to give you $50 by mentioning the promo code LOCKED ON at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. All right, guys, we welcome you back right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast. Once again, I'm Chris Russell. Thanks for making us your first listen and your first view each and every day. Now, make sure you check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview starting August 31st. That's shortly. An 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NFL season. The local team experts of the Locked On Podcast Network and Audacy NFL insiders all combining into one ultimate NFL preview. Starting August 31st, search for Ultimate Pro Football Preview 22 on your Audacy app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, it is time to make our 53-man roster projections. And again, by the time you watch or listen to this, some of these guys might already, quite honestly, be cut. Hopefully, not too many of them. Nobody's perfect. And we're just going to do our best using our educated guesses. But again, there's all sorts of factors that could go in, injuries, situations that we weren't accounting for, like we noted with the Brian Robinson situation. So we're going to do the offense first, and then we'll do the defense. Then we'll give you at least one cut that's already come through as we're recording this, and some sad news all before the end of the show. So let's start with quarterbacks. David has Carson Wentz. Go figure. Taylor Heineke and Sam Howell. Again, go figure. Same for me. I have both of those, all three of those guys in terms of making my 53-man roster. Shouldn't be a surprise. A quarterback name to watch out for was released by the Philadelphia Eagles, Carson Strong out of Nevada. He was a high priority undrafted free agent. Washington spent a lot of time with him in the pre-draft process, just a name to keep an eye on because Washington cut their fourth quarterback, Cole Kelly, and they don't have one on the practice squad. Again, this would not be for the active 53. It would just simply be for the practice squad. Now, so 3 each, simple. Running backs. Brian Robinson Jr., our understanding is he has to be carried through on the initial 53 and then put on either IR or the NFI list. He cannot go on the physically unable to perform list. Either or, he has to be carried through. That's the way the rules have been. I have not seen any update or change to that. That's the way it's being presented by other reporters. So I'm going to assume that's true, meaning Brian Robinson Jr. has to be carried as one of the 53 towards to Tuesday's 4 o'clock Eastern time deadline. And then at some point after that, I'm not sure exactly the timing, but probably Wednesday afternoon Eastern time, Brian Robinson can then be transferred to whatever list. And again, it likely will be the NFI list because the injured reserve list has some weird wonky rules that Washington wants to give flexibility on. All right, so I think we both have Brian Robinson Jr., again, having to be carried through on the initial roster. Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic, obvious. The fourth running back, and it is the same for both David and myself, is Jonathan Williams. That means no Jared Patterson, no Reggie Bonifant. Maybe they can get both of those guys through to the practice squad. Maybe they can get one. I would assume they would go Patterson over Bonifant if they have a choice, but they may not have a choice because, again, Patterson might get an opportunity somewhere else. For wide receivers, David has 6 total wide receivers and mostly the obvious names that you would expect: Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, Cam Sims, De'Ami Brown, and Dax Milne. Now, Alex Erickson and Marcon Michel are among the group. Matt Cole as well, off of that list. All 3 have had moments, but you probably can't take any more than 6 because of number crunches elsewhere. Now, I have the same, but again, the question becomes is, do they take Alex Erickson over a Dax Milne or in addition to Dax Milne as a 7th? I don't think they will. I thought Alex Erickson would make the roster at the beginning of camp. He hadn't been impressive enough to me, especially on the kickoff returns. But remember, he does return kicks, he does return punts, and he is a wide receiver. And that's basically 3 essentially roster spots or jobs or roles for the price of 1. So keep that in mind. I wouldn't be shocked if they take 7. I wouldn't do it, but maybe they do it. And I'll explain why I might have the opportunity to do that a little bit later on. So again, those are our wide receivers. Now, for tight end, this is where we're going to have a little bit of a disagreement. David has Logan Thomas, John Bates, Cole Turner. We both agree on those 3 names. I think that's pretty obvious. David has a 4th tight end in Armani Rogers. As of Friday, and before the injury and incident to Brian Robinson, I thought they might be able to carry 4 tight ends because I thought they might go 3 running backs or something like that. But now, obviously, again, they have to carry a 4th running back through, at least everything I can reasonably tell, again, because of the weird, wild NFL roster rules. So to me, I don't have them taking Armani Rogers. I know he's looked impressive at times, but he's still got some development. He's, remember, just a college quarterback last year. I know they want to keep working with him. Give him a chance. Let him go to the practice squad. Hopefully nobody snatches him up. You can't take everybody, guys. So I'm going with 3. David's going with 4. As far as the offensive line, David is going with 10. A lot of the predictable names: Charles Leno, Andrew Norwell, Chase Roulier, Trey Turner, Sam Cosby, Cornelius Lucas, Wes Schweitzer, Chris Paul, Sadi Charles, and his 10th is Keith Ismail. I'm going with everyone on David's list with the exception of Ismail, who I'm going to try and get through to the practice squad, re-sign at that point, which I believe is Wednesday at noon officially, but also with the thought of adding a veteran that gets cut loose for my 10th offensive linemen. I do ultimately think the number will be 10 on the offensive line, but that might not come until later on. So David has 27 players on offense, which is a lot, quite honestly. Most do no more than 26. I have 25, 9 offensive linemen, 3 tight ends, that's 12, 6 receivers, that's 18, 4 running backs, that's 22, and 3 quarterbacks. So again, I have 25. David has 27 in terms of the offensive side of the ball. Now, coming up next, we will give you our defensive picks. Plus, a cut has already reportedly happened on Monday afternoon, and tragedy once again hitting the Commanders family. We'll explain all of that and more coming up on the Locked On Commanders podcast. Thanks for being with us. Are you guys one of those people that think it's okay to drive stoned? Well, if you are, that's pretty bad decision. What's the worst that can happen, right? You end up driving below the speed limit. You kind of drift all over the place. It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is your reaction times slow down way more when you're high. You're not only going to put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. There's no need for it. You want to talk about a buzzkill? How about killing somebody else or killing yourself? Stop kidding yourself. It's okay. It's not okay. Not okay. Let me be clear. To drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. Let me repeat. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. It is unsafe. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high and get a DUI. All right, guys, we continue along with our Commanders 53-man roster projections. And again, some of these guys might get cut in the wash here by the time you're watching and listening. I mean, we have no choice but to do this. And obviously, again, some moves can already affect by the time maybe you get to listen or watch this. But hopefully, we're pretty close to being right. Nobody's perfect at this. This is an inexact science, to say the least. So on the defensive line, remember how heavy David went on the offensive line, but that doesn't really affect him on the defensive line. He's got Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, Montez Sweat, James Smith-Williams, that's 4, Fedarian Mathis, 5, Casey Toohill, 6, Daniel Wise, 7, David Botta, interesting, Shaka Toney, that's 8, and Justin Hamilton, 9. That's a total of 10 with the exception for the international player exception for Botta. So a true 9, but total 10. Interesting. My defensive line group looks like this. David's first 7. However, I'm not going to bring David Botta with me. I'll try and get him through the practice squad again. I don't even know if he can play on the international player exemption. I'm unclear on that rule, so I don't want to go too far on that, but I believe that to be the case. He would need to then count. So I'm just going to go with that premise, and David Botta is not good enough, in my opinion, to justify a roster spot, but I am going to go with Shaka Toney. And instead of Justin Hamilton, I'm going to go with F.A. Obata, the extra pass rusher, because this team needs juice. Toney, F.A. Obata, Daniel Wise, making up a second group that can all generate some pass rush when legs get tired and when you need it and when you need to get off the field on third down. So again, David has a total of 10, a true 9 in terms of the roster countage. I have 9, but we differ on Justin Hamilton and David Botta, who he's carrying. I'm carrying Shaka Toney as well as he, but also F.A. Obata for a true 9. Again, my true 9 are Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, Montez Sweat, James Smith-Williams, Fedarian Mathis, Casey Toohill, Daniel Wise. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, plus Shaka Toney and F.A. Obata for my true 9. So again, we have the same true number. It's just we did it a little bit differently. As far as linebacker, this is where we both go light, but we both have a difference. Cole Holcomb, Jamin Davis, and David Mayo for David, plus Khaleke Hudson. I'm going to go the same first 3, Cole, Jamin, Mayo, but I'm going to go Milo Eifler, who was brought here late last year. So we both wind up with 4. Possibility that you add to that group with a veteran, we'll see. But Milo Eifler for me and Khaleke Hudson for David. At corner, David's going with a total of 6, which I think is what most people are going with. Some people have 5. Kendall Fuller, William Jackson III, Benjamin St-Juste, Danny Johnson, Christian Holmes, the 7th-round rookie, and Corn Elder. I agree with all 6 of those picks, and that's the way I'm going to go as well. So 6 for each one of us. And at safety, now this is where we differ. David's got 4. He goes with Cam Curl, Bobby McCain, Derek Forrest, and Percy Butler. I'm going with 5, adding to that mix of those 4, Jeremy Reeves. I think Jeremy Reeves balled out on Saturday night, had a near interception, had that great run stop on 3rd and 2. I think he's good on special teams. I think he's physical. I think this coaching staff likes him. I think he's developed. I'm going to go with Jeremy Reeves. Plus, I need an extra safety because I play Buffalo nickel 50 plus ish % of the time. So if you use my counting and my accounting, and maybe I'll be wrong on this, that leaves me with 24 on defense, right? Because I have 11 defensive backs, 4 linebackers. That's 15, and 9 off defensive linemen. That's 24. But I only had 25 on offense. So you see what I'm doing here? I only have 49 plus 3 specialists, which means 52. Now, you might say that's crazy. Why wouldn't you take 53? Listen, I know I'm a little bit different, taking a shot here. I'm not rewarding, quite honestly, Keith Ismail, who's not good enough, with a 53-man roster spot just to whack him a day later. To me, I'd just rather take 52 than 53. I'm not saying they're going to do it this way, but if they do it this way, where did you hear it first? Right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast. David has 27 on offense, 23 on defense, and the exemption for David Botta plus 3 specialists. So again, that's his 53. We'll see if these stick. Again, deadline coming up Tuesday at 4. Stephen Parker has already reportedly been released, a young safety. That first reported by Ben Standing of The Athletic. That is not official, but Ben is always right. All right, Ernie Zampese passed away on Monday morning. He is the father of Commanders quarterback coach Ken Zampese, an offensive innovator who coached with some of the greats, including Joe Jackson. Yeah, rest in peace, Ernie Zampese, and our thoughts with Ken Zampese, the quarterback's coach of the Washington Commander, and his family. All right. Thanks again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and your first watch of the day. Now make the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast your second listen and view. Find the intellectual fantasy expert. That's Vinny Iron, who brings over 20 years of NFL experience and a unique angle to give you the moves that no one else has. Get ready for your fantasy draft with Locked On Fantasy Football. We'll be back with another episode and reaction to all the cuts on Tuesday's 4 Eastern Time deadline. If you want to hop in, it's 301-615-3577 on the voicemail. Again, 301-615-3577. Or if you want to email, it's lockedonwashingtoncommanders@gmail.com. For David Harrison, who, again, is under the weather, we wish him the very best, normally covering the Washington Commanders. For SI.com's Fan Nation and Commander Country, I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst Show on the Team 980 with Pete Medhurst. If you're out and about, please be safe. Be kind to one another. Please stop the gun violence. Don't drive like a maniac, and thank you for joining us right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.